The geographical focal point of this inquiry is located in Ponce de Leon, Florida, at a site known as Vortex Spring. This location serves as a commercial recreation area, facilitating swimming and technical diving operations. The geological structure consists of a natural limestone basin measuring approximately 200 feet in diameter, which feeds into a subterranean aquifer system. The water temperature is documented to remain at a constant 68 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the calendar year, a condition maintained by the natural flow of 28 million gallons of water daily. The clarity of the water is historically noted as high, often exceeding 100 feet of visibility, which makes it a frequent destination for underwater activities. According to site maps and survey data, the spring basin slopes downward to a depth of roughly 50 feet. At this specific depth, a cave opening exists, marking the transition from open water recreational areas to a restricted overhead environment. The cave system extends further into the earth, narrowing significantly as the depth increases. At 115 feet, there is a locked steel gate. This barrier was installed to prevent unauthorized access to the dangerous sections of the cave system, specifically a long, narrow passage often referred to by divers as the wormhole. The total length of the mapped system extends over 1,600 feet, though the exact dimensions of the deepest sections remain a subject of geological survey rather than recreational mapping. The subject of the investigation was 30-year-old Ben McDaniel. Documents recovered from his residence and personal files indicated that he was originally from Collierville, Tennessee. Records show that he had relocated to Florida in April of 2010. He was residing in a condominium in Santa Rosa Beach, a property owned by his parents. Background checks conducted during the initial phases of the inquiry revealed significant personal stressors in the months leading up to August 2010. Financial records indicated a bankruptcy filing, and court documents confirmed a recent divorce. Furthermore, the subject was in the process of grieving the loss of a sibling 2 years prior. These factors were noted by investigators as relevant context for establishing the subject's state of mind. Although no definitive conclusions regarding intent were drawn solely from this data, the subject's diving qualifications were a matter of scrutiny. According to certification cards and training logs, Ben McDaniel held an open water certification. He was actively pursuing advanced certification levels, but had not yet completed the requisite training for full cave diving operations. Cave diving requires specialized protocols, equipment, and distinct certification cards that verify a diver's ability to manage overhead environments where direct ascent to the surface is impossible. The absence of this specific certification meant that the subject was not authorized to pass the locked gate situated at the 115-foot mark within the Vortex Spring system. Witness statements and dive logs reconstructed the timeline of the subject's activity at Vortex Spring during the summer of 2010. Employees at the dive shop reported that the subject had become a frequent visitor, often arriving daily or multiple times a week. The logbooks kept by the facility recorded his presence consistently throughout July and August. During these visits, the subject was observed testing equipment, practicing buoyancy control, and exploring the cavern zone, which is the area of the cave still illuminated by natural daylight. The timeline of the disappearance centers on the week of August 16th, 2010. On Wednesday, August 18th, atmospheric conditions in Ponce de Leon were consistent with the region's subtropical climate. Meteorological records indicate high humidity and ambient temperatures peaking in the mid-90s. The subject arrived at Vortex Spring and performed at least one dive during daylight hours. Witnesses, including dive shop employees, noted that he was utilizing a specific set of equipment. This inventory included standard back-mounted tanks, a helmet equipped with lights, and a wetsuit. It is relevant to the procedural timeline that during this period, the lock on the underwater gate was a point of contention. The shop staff controlled the key, and access was strictly limited to certified cave divers. However, anecdotal reports from fellow divers and observations made by staff suggested that the gate had been tampered with, or that the subject had found a method to bypass the restriction on previous occasions. One employee statement indicated that the subject had been seen inspecting the gate closely on previous dives. On August 18th, the timeline focuses on the final known movements of the subject. At approximately 11 o'clock in the morning, witness accounts place the subject at the Vortex Spring dive shop. He was observed filling his tanks. The gas fill logs indicate that he filled 2 aluminum 80 tanks with standard air. This detail is significant because standard air is typically used for recreational depths, whereas technical cave dives often utilize different gas mixtures, such as nitrox or trimix, to manage nitrogen narcosis and oxygen toxicity at depth. The use of standard air suggests a plan for a dive within moderate limits, or a lack of adherence to technical deep diving protocols. At midday, around 12 o'clock post-meridian, the subject was seen preparing his gear near the water's edge. The inventory of equipment he carried into the water was noted by observers and later cross-referenced with items missing from his residence. The list included a wetsuit, a buoyancy control device, a pair of fins, a mask, a regulator set, and the 2 aluminum 80 tanks. Notably, the subject was not seen carrying a reel or a guideline. In cave diving, a continuous guideline is a critical safety tool used to navigate back to the exit. The absence of this item was later flagged by recovery teams as a procedural deviation. Between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock post-meridian, the subject entered the water. Several other divers were present in the spring basin at this time. One witness, a dive shop employee named Eduardo Terran, reported seeing the subject descending toward the cave entrance. Terran was returning from a dive and was performing a decompression stop near the entrance of the cave. According to Terran's statement, he saw the subject swim past him, heading deeper into the system. Terran noted that the subject appeared to be equipping his helmet lights and seemed purposeful in his descent. This interaction occurred at a depth of roughly 50 to 60 feet. Another employee, Chuck Cronin, also interacted with the subject on the surface prior to the dive. Cronin's statement indicated that he spoke with the subject about the dive plan. The subject reportedly mentioned an intention to explore the cave entrance, but did not explicitly state an intention to breach the gate. This conversation is the last verbal record of the subject. The timeline moves to the late evening of August 18th. As the sun began to set around 7:30 post-meridian, the facility was winding down operations for the day. Terran, the employee mentioned previously, provided a statement regarding the gate. Procedurally, the gate was intended to remain locked unless a certified cave diver requested access. Terran admitted to investigators that he unlocked the gate earlier in the day to allow McDaniel access. Despite McDaniel lacking the requisite certification paper trail, Terran then observed McDaniel enter the water near the diving platform for a twilight dive. The time was approximately 7:30 post-meridian. Terran reported watching McDaniel descend toward the cave entrance and observed the subject's lights fading as he went deeper into the cavern. This visual confirmation at 7:30 post-meridian represents the last verified sighting of Ben McDaniel. The procedural expectation was that McDaniel would return to the surface within a standard operational window, typically between 45 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on his air consumption and depth. As the evening progressed, employees closed the shop. The protocols for checking out divers were loose. There was no strict sign-out sheet mandated at the exit point that evening. At the conclusion of operations on the night of August 18th, staff members noted that a vehicle remained in the parking lot. The vehicle was identified as a chocolate brown Ford F-150 pickup truck. It was parked in a space adjacent to the main dive entry point. Staff members later testified that they assumed McDaniel had left the premises with another individual, or had perhaps exited the water unseen and was staying in the local area, as it was not unprecedented for divers to camp nearby. Consequently, no alarm was raised, and the facility was secured for the night. The timeline continues into August 19th, 2010. The facility opened for business at 8 ante-meridian. Employees arriving for the morning shift observed the pickup truck still parked in the same location. It had not moved. Throughout the operational hours of August 19th, recreational swimmers and divers utilized the spring. No reports of an underwater emergency or sighting of a stationary diver were logged. The truck remained unnoticed as a point of concern until the following day. On the morning of August 20th, 2010, the continued presence of the vehicle prompted action. 2 days had elapsed since McDaniel was last seen entering the water. At this point, facility management attempted to locate the driver. Upon closer inspection of the vehicle, staff realized the truck belonged to the diver, who had entered the water on the evening of August 18th. Law enforcement was notified, and the Holmes County Sheriff's Office dispatched units to the site. Upon arrival, deputies initiated a preliminary assessment. The first procedural step was to secure the vehicle and the immediate area surrounding the spring. The truck was treated as a repository of evidence. Investigators conducted a thorough inventory of the Ford F-150 to establish the subject's intent and state of mind. Inside the cabin, officers found a wallet containing identification and approximately $1,100 in cash. A cellular telephone was located on the seat. A detailed map of the cave system was also discovered. The presence of these items suggested that McDaniel intended to return to the vehicle. The cash and phone indicated he had not fled the area, and the map pointed to his focus on the cave system. Additionally, investigation of the truck bed revealed standard items consistent with a diver's routine, but no indications of a struggle or external interference were noted on the vehicle's exterior. Simultaneously, the aquatic search protocols were activated. Because the subject was last seen entering the water, the primary theory was a failure to resurface. The Holmes County Sheriff's Office coordinated with specialized recovery divers to inspect the spring. The initial underwater assessment yielded immediate physical evidence. At a depth of approximately 20 feet near the entrance to the cavern zone, divers located 2 decompression tanks clipped to a safety line. In technical diving protocols, divers often stage extra tanks at shallow depths to use during the decompression phase of their ascent. The regulators on these tanks were inspected, and the pressure gauges indicated they were full. This evidence suggested that McDaniel had staged them for his exit, but had never returned to this depth to utilize them. The investigation then turned to the cave system itself. The geography of the cave beyond the gate is complex. It begins with a long, downward sloping tunnel. The walls are composed of limestone, and the floor is covered in deep silt and sand. This silt is easily disturbed. A diver's fin kick can create a silt out, reducing visibility to 0 in seconds. The cave extends to a depth of roughly 300 feet and includes several chambers, notably the talk room and the piano room. However, beyond these mapped areas lie tight restrictions, narrow passages where a diver must remove gear to squeeze through. Recovery divers, including highly credentialed professionals from the International Underwater Cave Rescue and Recovery Organization, were summoned. Among them was Ed Sorensen, a globally recognized recovery diver with extensive experience in the Florida aquifer. Over the subsequent days, a systematic grid search of the cave commenced. On August 21st and 22nd, the search intensified. Divers pushed past the gate, entering the restricted zone. They navigated the narrow passages, scanning the floor and ceiling for any sign of the missing individual. The conditions were challenging due to the flow of the spring, which pushes divers outward. The condition of the gate on the morning of August 21st is a critical piece of physical evidence. When recovery divers first approached the gate, they documented that it was unlocked. Further inspection revealed that a section of the gate had been manipulated, allowing a diver to squeeze through without fully opening the mechanism, or that the lock had been left unsecured. This finding aligned with the earlier anecdotal reports that the subject had been attempting to access the restricted area. Beyond the gate lies the restricted zone. Warning signs are posted clearly at this juncture. The primary sign depicts a grim reaper figure and contains text explicitly warning that divers who proceed past this point without proper training and equipment will lose their lives. The sign mandates that no one pass without cave certification. The fact that the subject was known to lack this certification, yet the gate was found accessible, established the primary theory of the investigation: that the subject had entered the deep cave system and failed to exit. Sorensen's methodology was methodical and relied on the principle that a diver in distress will typically leave physical traces of their struggle. Sorensen entered the cave system with the objective of locating the missing individual, or, barring that, locating equipment. He examined the floor and ceiling of the limestone tunnels. In a narrow, silt-bottomed environment, a diver moving in panic or distress will invariably disturb the sediment. This silt, once disturbed, can take hours or days to settle, but it also leaves impact marks on the cave features. According to Sorensen's post-dive report, the cave was pristine. There were no fin marks on the clay banks. There were no scratches on the ceiling where buoyant tanks might have scraped against the rock. Sorensen reached the end of the measuring line, a guideline permanently installed in the cave to assist with navigation. Beyond this point, the cave restricts significantly. The passage narrows to a height of roughly 10 inches in certain areas. To pass through, a diver must detach their tanks and push them forward, a maneuver known as side mounting or no mounting. The subject was reported to be diving with a standard back-mounted configuration, which would make passing such a restriction physically impossible without removing the equipment entirely. Sorensen pushed his search into the tightest crevices of the system, areas where the subject could not reasonably have fit with his reported gear. The recovery specialist repeated these dives multiple times, searching side fissures and small alcoves. At no point during the comprehensive sweep did Sorensen locate a mask, a fin, a dive light, or the subject himself. The total absence of equipment was noted as a significant deviation from standard recovery scenarios. In almost every instance of a fatal incident within a cave, floating equipment or discarded weight belts are located even if the individual is concealed by silt. Here, the environment was sterile of foreign objects. Concurrent with the underwater search, investigators utilized canine units on the surface. These specially trained dogs are capable of detecting the scent of human decomposition rising through the water column. Handlers guided the canines over the surface of the spring in boats and along the banks. According to the canine reports, the dogs alerted on the water. Specifically, they signaled the presence of the target scent in the area directly above the cave entrance and along the banks of the spring. This result was documented as a positive indication that biological material associated with the subject was or had recently been in the water. This created a forensic conflict. The biological sensors, the dogs, indicated the subject was in the water. The physical search specialist, Sorensen, concluded with high probability that the subject was not in the accessible sections of the cave. To resolve this conflict, the investigation turned to the possibility that the subject had become lodged in a section of the cave previously unmapped or deemed impassable. A remotely operated vehicle was deployed to assist in the search. However, the technical limitations of the vehicle became apparent in the tight restrictions of the limestone. The tether required to control the unit risked becoming entangled, and the propulsion systems stirred up visibility-reducing particulate matter. The vehicle could not penetrate deeper than the human divers. The timeline of the investigation extended into weeks. The family of the missing individual financed further exploration. This phase involved heavy logistical operations. Dredging equipment was proposed to remove silt from the rear of the cave to reveal potential hidden passages. This action was controversial as it altered the geological preservation of the site and posed risks to the structural integrity of the cave entrance. Nevertheless, divers continued to probe the sediment. During this secondary phase, searchers located a small aluminum shovel in the cave. This item led to immediate speculation regarding whether the subject had brought a shovel to dig through a restriction. Analysis of the shovel later determined it was likely left by the search teams themselves, or was an artifact from previous maintenance, as opposed to equipment carried by the subject. No other personal effects were catalogued. Investigators also analyzed the air consumption rates recorded in the subject's previous dive logs. Based on the tank size, standard aluminum 80 cubic foot cylinders, and the depth of the cave, the subject would have had a finite gas supply. At a depth of 100 feet, air is consumed 4 times faster than at the surface due to pressure. With a twin tank setup, the total bottom time would be limited. If the subject had entered the water at 7:30 post-meridian, his air supply would have been exhausted before midnight on August 18th. The search teams also considered the flow of the spring. Vortex Spring discharges millions of gallons of water daily. This positive pressure constantly pushes objects out of the cave. If a diver were to experience a medical event or equipment failure in the main tunnel, the flow should, theoretically, assist in drifting the individual toward the exit. The fact that the subject was not found near the entrance, nor in the restriction, forced investigators to consider the entrapment theory, that the subject wedged himself so tightly into a crevice against the flow that he could not be dislodged. To test this, divers measured the dimensions of the restrictions against the anthropometric data of the subject. The subject was 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighed approximately 210 pounds. The largest opening at the back of the cave measured roughly 10 inches by 14 inches. Procedurally, it was deemed highly improbable that an individual of that size could pass through such an aperture, particularly while wearing a buoyancy compensator and tanks, without leaving shredded neoprene, scraped skin, or gouged limestone. 36 days into the investigation, a specific recovery effort was launched focusing on a tight passage past the known limits of the cave. This operation was dangerous. The recovery divers had to remove their own gear to squeeze through. They meticulously felt along the floor and ceiling. They utilized high-intensity discharge lights to cut through the darkness. The result remained consistent: negative contact. The investigation then had to account for the possibility of a staged disappearance. Law enforcement revisited the scene at the surface. The fence line surrounding Vortex Spring was examined for breaches. The property is vast and rural, surrounded by wooded areas. While the main gate is monitored, the perimeter is not impenetrable. However, the canine units had alerted specifically on the water, not on a trail leading away from the spring. This sustained the focus on the aquatic environment despite the lack of visual confirmation. Reports from the dive shop employees were re-interviewed. The specific timeline of the unlocked gate became a focal point. It was noted that the employee who unlocked the gate had gone home for the evening shortly after. There was a window of several hours where the spring was unsupervised. It was during this window that the subject presumably initiated the dive. As the weeks turned into months, the active search was scaled down. The case files remained open, categorized under missing persons. The inventory of the truck, the cash, the map, the phone remained in evidence storage. The decompression tanks found at the water's edge were documented as the last physical link between Ben McDaniel and the dry land. At the 1-year mark, a memorial service was held, yet the file remained open. The status of the investigation lingered in a gray area between a missing persons case and a presumptive death. A certificate of death was eventually issued by a judge based on the timeline of absence and the circumstances of the disappearance. But the evidentiary requirements for a physical recovery remained unfulfilled. Investigators noted a distinct split in the conclusion of the case. One side, supported by the dive experts, relied on the tangible absence of silt disturbance and the thoroughness of the search to conclude the individual was not in the water. The other side, supported by the initial witness reports and the presence of the vehicle, relied on the timeline that placed him at the water's edge. The two sets of facts, the presence of the truck and the absence of the person, created a procedural paradox that the investigation could not resolve. In the final summary of the aftermath, the case file lists the specific equipment the individual was believed to be wearing: a wetsuit, a dive computer, tanks, and a helmet with lights. None of these synthetic materials, which do not degrade rapidly, were ever located. The search covered the surrounding woods, the basin, the cave, and the financials of the subject. No activity was ever recorded on his bank accounts or credit cards after August 18th, 2010. The phone records showed no outgoing calls after his arrival at the spring. The gate at Vortex Spring was eventually secured with a new protocol, and the warning signs were updated, citing the hazards of the environment. The Ford F-150 was released to the family. The decompression tanks were logged into evidence and eventually returned. The case of Ben McDaniel remains a matter of record where the timeline ends at the water the evidence does not continue beneath the surface.